I'm thrilled to extend a warm welcome to each one of you to the first day of our event, Inclusion Insights 2024, SAWI's 4-year journey to crafting the MENA Women's Inclusion Indices. As we embark on an exciting journey to unveil the results of a phase that has been nothing short of groundbreaking. Today marks a significant milestone in the evolution of the SAWI project, and we are delighted to have you join us for this momentous occasion. My name is Olfat Khattar, and I am the Regional Manager of SAWI project at the American University of Beirut. Over the past 4 years, our dedicated team has poured their passion, creativity, and expertise into shaping the future of SAWI. The culmination of countless hours of hard work, collaboration, and innovation is finally ready to be showcased to the audience. This online launch event is not just a presentation. It is a testament to the power of teamwork and dedication. We believe that SAWI has the potential to make a lasting impact, and today's reveal is a glimpse into the incredible journey we have undertaken to turn the potential into reality. I would like to share with you some of the technical details related to this event. For interpretation to Arabic or French, you can access this service via the interpretation button on Zoom as shown on the screen. We will be covering our MENA region findings, focusing mainly on these 4 sectors: education, healthcare, STEM, financial service. So please update your Zoom name with your preferred language and sector. We will also answer the sector names in the chat, while your microphones will be muted. To maintain order, we warmly encourage you to share your questions through the chat or YouTube comments. Our team will be actively monitoring both to address your queries either during or after our session. To access the slides handout for today, please scan this QR code. A link to download them also will be pasted in the chat. Should you need any technical assistance, feel free to reach out through the chat or by emailing sawi@aub.edu.lb. We would appreciate if you could please enable your cameras at the end for a group photo, capturing the essence of our gathering. And a final note, we would be providing a certificate of attendance for participants who attended the 2 days event. So please watch out for an email in the coming 2 weeks. So get ready to be inspired, amazed, and captivated by the results of our collective efforts. This is not just a phase completion, it's a leap forward into a new era of the SAWI project. I would like to thank you once again for being a part of this extraordinary event. And now, it is my pleasure to introduce Professor Charlotte Karam, an exceptional principal investigator and the visionary leader behind SAWI that's shaping the future. We are particularly proud to have Charlotte as our primary investigator at SAWI, where her expertise and leadership continue to drive our project forward. Excitingly, her contributions have been globally recognized, as she has recently been recognized by the Financial Times among the world's best academic research with societal impact. This recognition is a testament to her profound influence and commitment to creating meaningful societal change. With immense respect and admiration, I welcome Professor Karam to the stage.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Olfat, for those generous words and for kicking off today's session. It gives me great pleasure to have everyone here today. Because I am currently in Canada, it is customary for us to pay our respects. So we pay respect to the Algonquin people, who are the traditional guardians of this land. We acknowledge their long-standing relationship with this territory, which remains unceded. We pay respect to all Indigenous people in this region from all nations across Canada who call Ottawa home, and all Indigenous people around the world. We acknowledge the traditional knowledge keepers, both young and old, and we honor their courageous leaders, past, present, and future. On behalf of SAWI, on behalf of the American University of Beirut and the Telfer School of Management at the University of Ottawa, and our co-PIs pictured here, and our fantastic SAWI team in Beirut and in Ottawa, also pictured here, and our remarkable and wonderful local partners around the region. It gives me great pleasure to welcome you all to our two-part event, the second wave results of the KIP Index, and tomorrow, the Lived Experience Index. It is wonderful to have you all with us, especially during this ongoing difficult time. Perhaps you could write the cities that you're joining us from in the chat. If you could take a moment to do that, that'd be great. It's really, really great to see so many people and to welcome everyone from across the region and across time zones. Esteemed colleagues at AUB and University of Ottawa, Associate Provost Lina Schweide, Dr. Fadi Hamaidan, Mr. Philippe Duwamba, Ms. Linda Lizot, Dr. Rita Stefan, distinguished MEPI team, AUB and U Ottawa colleagues and students, friends and guests, thank you for honoring us with your presence at this event. This work was made possible through generous funding of the Middle East Partnership Initiative at the U.S. State Department, and we are very grateful to the funder for not only the financial support, but also for the great partnership of the MEPI DC and MEPI Beirut teams throughout all of our work, and as our work continues forward, but also for the great partnership throughout these 2 years. I'd like to make a special thanks to Mr. Ahmed Gutan, Ms. Shay McNeil, Ms. Gina Riyad, Ms. Maisa Ubaidi, Mr. Thomas Rohan, as well as the phenomenal MEPI Beirut team, Ms. Maya Barhush and Mr. David Lewis. What's our agenda for today? We have a jam-packed agenda, very exciting things. We're going to start with a big picture where I'm going to try to situate the work that we're doing in the broader picture of measuring women's economic empowerment. We'll then have our wonderful keynote speaker, Dr. Rita Stefan, take the floor. We'll then dive into the index findings, the KIP index findings. And then for those who are joining us today on the YouTube channel, that will be the end of our journey today. But for those who are in the Zoom room or with us on Zoom, we will break out into discussion rooms, sector-based discussion rooms, to have some sector insight discussions. So let me start. I want to start by addressing the big picture. There are a number of pre-existing indices that exist out there. One prominent one, for example, is the Global Gender Gap Index. This index, the GGI, is developed by the World Economic Forum. It is an annual benchmarking tool that measures gender parity across 4 key dimensions, across economic participation and opportunity, education attainment, health and survival, and political empowerment. It is a well-established index that tracks progress and has been tracking progress since 2006 and now includes 146 countries. It is a national level index. Scores on the GGI range from 0 to 100, where 0 signifies inequality and 100 represents parity. These scores show the progress towards gender parity in each of the nations. That is the percentage of the gap that has been closed between men and women on these 4 dimensions. According to the most recent 2023 data, we see slow progress in closing gender gaps, underscoring the need for intensified efforts for bringing all hands on deck, multiple stakeholders. The current global gender gap, as you can see, on the side of the slide, is at 68.4% closed, which indicates a regression from 2020 by 0.6 percentage points. At the current rate of progress with this regression, it is estimated that it will take 131 years to reach full parity. When we compare the gender gap closure percentages across different regions, we see that Europe has closed by 76.3%, North America 75%, Sub-Saharan Africa 68.2%. But where does the MENA stand? The MENA region trails behind at 62.6% of the percentage of gender gap having been closed, the region furthest away from parity. When we look closely at the gender gap in economic participation and opportunity specifically, it is the only dimension that we actually see a widening of the gap. Today, the closure of the global economic participation and opportunity gap stands at 60.1% globally. At this rate, it is estimated that the time to achieve global parity in this dimension will take 169 years compared to educational attainment, which will be about 16 years. Regional comparisons on economic participation and opportunity show that, and you'll see on the slide there, for Europe, 69.7% of this gap has been closed between men and women. In North America, 77.6%, and Sub-Saharan Africa, 67.2%. And again, the MENA region is trailing behind, with only 44% of the gender gap in economic participation and opportunity closed. 44%. Of course, we brace ourselves very dearly in anticipation of the next wave of data that will better reflect the full impact of the pandemic and the full impact of the current and ongoing hostilities and atrocities and instabilities in the region. This gap is likely to increase. So what can be done? What can be done? This national level data and indices data give us the picture of nation level, but we ask ourselves, what can we do to be part of closing or contributing to the closing of this gap? Our suggestion at SAWI is to look within and to engage directly with employers and with women on strategies forward. This is difficult, however, particularly difficult because there is a dire data deficit. Building strategies to partner with women and employers is difficult because there's no data or there's very little data to help us be strategic in that partnership. Building strategies for more inclusive workplaces has been like building in the dark. This data deficit is a darkness that blurs any roadmap for contextualized, sector-specific, company-specific way forward. Consider questions like, what proportion of applications are received by women compared to men in a particular organization or a particular sector? Do we know? Is it higher for employers in healthcare or in higher education? Is it higher for Lebanon or Bahrain or Libya? What percentage of women working in STEM report experiencing discrimination in the recruitment process? And how does this compare to the financial sector? Such very basic HR questions are hard to answer today. The sad reality is that even when we can answer using a single sector or single country statistic, we do not have a good answer that is regional and that is comparable between countries or sectors within the region. This lack of regional cross-country comparable data hampers efforts to understand and address gender disparity effectively on the ground within sectors. Compounding the data deficit and therefore compounding the uncertainty in how to build a roadmap for the way forward, there are two additional salient factors that I want to bring to bear in this big picture because we try to tackle them in the KIP Index. The first factor has to do with the often misplaced focus on multinational and transnational corporations headquartered elsewhere but operating in the region. These organizations' data are often included in national level indices. These organizations are important to measure, no doubt, but the organizations are important to collect data from, but in reality, these entities do not employ the majority of people in the region. In fact, the World Bank estimates that small and medium-sized enterprises represent 80 to 90% of the formal sector and serve as the cornerstone of the economy. So a concerted focus needs to be looking at SMEs and measuring SMEs. The second factor that compounds our way forward and increases the darkness of the data deficit is the tendency to measure women's economic participation by drawing largely from women working in the public sector. It's wonderful that many countries are employing women in the public sector, are measuring public sector, but focusing on the public sector may sometimes present an overly positive picture, particularly in resource-rich countries, which skews the data. An accurate picture of women's inclusion must be based on data collected in a nuanced and comprehensive manner across sectors outside and not just the public sector. So with all that in mind, what data do we really have that is local, that is gender disaggregated, accessible, and pays attention to the portion of the market that is made up of SMEs and in the various sectors that we've noted before? The answer is not much data. Tracking progress and making strategic changes requires data from the region and for the region. So here's my point. Making strategic changes requires tracking progress, and tracking progress requires data. This is why we've invited you here today to share with you our results of the KIP Index. And tomorrow, hopefully you'll join us, our results of the Lived Experience Index. Our approach is a feminist participatory action research model approach, which means that we are guided by evidence. So contextualized evidence that is locally relevant, generated by women and organizations in the region. We are participatory. We have created with our fantastic country partners the tools we use, the questions we ask, the data we collect, the way we analyze and interpret our data. We are feminist, which means that our aim is to improve the lived experience, the lives, the livelihood, and the work experiences of women and girls in the region today, urgently. And our model focuses on action by changing the structures that exclude or that oppress economic participation. In closing the data deficit, we have, with our country partners, successfully collected and surveyed 3,274 employers across sectors and countries of Middle East and North Africa. These surveys were analyzed and then computed into an index, the KIP Index, which by definition tracks local employer policies and their practices regarding the recruitment, retention, and promotion of women across sectors. We also engaged in interviewing 981 women across the region. These interviews were transcribed and analyzed, and we computed the Lived Experience Index. The Lived Experience Index tracks female citizen experiences of recruitment, retention, and promotion in the sectors within which they are currently employed. Those are the two indices. We focus on the KIP Index today and the Lived Experience Index tomorrow. So that's the general overview to give you a background of what we're doing here today. And now I would like, it gives me great, great pleasure and anticipation that I introduce our keynote speaker for today's SAWI's event, Dr. Rita Stefan. Dr. Stefan arrives with an impressive dossier of experience and leadership, primarily centered on enhancing women's economic and political inclusion and policy development in the MENA region. Her current role as Senior Advisor to the Director of the Office of Management Strategy and Solutions at the Department of State is just the tip of the iceberg. Dr. Stefan's career is marked by a series of influential positions. Previously, she served as the Regional Coordinator for Religious and Ethnic Minorities at USAID. From 2016 to 2020, she served as the Director of the Middle East Partnership Initiative, MEPI, in the Near Eastern Affairs Bureau's Office of Assistance Coordination, where she pioneered many gender initiatives in the region, including the SAWI Project, the KIP Project. In 2010, she was a survey statistician at the Population Division of the U.S. Census Bureau, where she initiated a campaign for a MENA checkbox. An academic at heart, Dr. Stefan's educational background is impressive as her professional one, holding a PhD in sociology from the University of Texas at Austin and combining this with a deep understanding of international affairs and conflict resolution from her studies at the American University. Notably, Dr. Stefan's influence extends far beyond her official title. She is a trailblazer, a real trailblazer among Arab Americans in the State Department. She serves in leadership roles across several prestigious organizations and is recognized author and editor on gender in the Middle East. Her work has consistently broken new ground, including the initiation of the MENA Again checkbox, quite an accomplishment within the U.S. Census Bureau. I cannot think of a more fitting keynote speaker for today's event. It was under Dr. Stefan's visionary leadership that the seeds of the KIP Index and the Lived Experience Index were planted, fostering what has now grown into an influential project that spans the region. Known for her inspirational leadership, Dr. Stefan is an energizing presence, a good friend, a motivating and infusing around her with the drive to achieve and excel. Her work sets in motion waves of change, true waves of change. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming a luminary in the field, an esteemed leader, and a wonderful human being, Dr. Rita Stefan.
Wow. Wow. Thank you. Thank you, Charlotte. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, the SAWI team, AUB. Thank you, the MEPI team. Amazing group of dedicated human beings. I just want to say this is what happens when you have a group of feminists come together. You know, government changes, the world changes. So it is my pleasure to tell you how this whole initiative started and the whole story. So I'm going to take you to the background, how this got cooked. 8 years ago, I was honored. I was counting. I kept writing 4, 6. No, it was 8. 8 years ago, I was honored to lead the Middle East Partnership Initiative at the State Department, MEPI. Our goal is promoting stability and prosperity in the Middle East and North Africa. Driven by an innovative approach to foreign assistance, we focused on responding to emerging opportunities through being field-driven, evidence-based, and results-oriented. Central to our work was women's political and economic empowerment because we believed they were critical to strengthening democratic institutions in the MENA region. 2017, this is back to 2017, the world was still trying to figure out what to make out of the Arab Spring and whether the Middle East was experiencing a democratic transition. I still think it's too early to tell. But while the international community was rushing to check the democracy box once elections took place in a country like Tunisia, we knew that strong economic development increases democratic ideal. Strong economic development increases democratic ideals throughout a country. And democratic transitions do not achieve consolidation without a set of economic norms, institutions, and regulations that mediate between the state and the market. That is solid theory of democratic transitions. At the center of creating democratic economic society, women must have equal opportunity to participate in, contribute to, and benefit from economic resources and opportunities. These include dignified jobs, career advancement opportunities, access to financial services, property ownerships, and other productive assets, skill development, and market information. But where do you start? How do you empower women economically? We started searching for information. What's our baseline? We found very little information. I'm glad that Dr. Kerem mentioned the World Economic Forum Global Gender Gap Index. That was one of the few measurements of women's economic well-being in the MENA region. As in 2017, is today, the gender parity in the Middle East is the worst in the world and is declining, 62.6%. The World Economic Forum predicts that it's going to take us 152 years to bridge that gap, that gender parity gap. Well, I'm not sure about you, but I don't have that much time. Before delving into designing a new bright idea, we said, okay, let's see what others are doing. So we consulted colleagues at USAID, the World Bank, OECD, and even the US Department of Labor and the International Labor Organizations. What are the big guys doing? We were curious to know what the world community has done for MENA women in the area of economic empowerment. And we were hit with few realities. First, the data that existed on women's labor participation lacked granularity. Other than telling us that the MENA region has the worst gender parity, the global gender gap did not offer us anything but bad news. Major organizations like the World Bank relied on countries and the governments in these countries to report data on overall female participation in the workforce. So we really lacked critical information such as earning by sector or pay gap by earning by sector. And all this critical information were left out. Second, and more importantly, is that most foreign assistance programs focused on women entrepreneurs. Let's think about these numbers. In the Middle East, about 18% of women engage in formal work, compared to the global average, about 48, 50%. Yet, the most assistance programs, most international donors focus only on a maximum 1/3 of these women who engage in entrepreneurial work and who are anyway outside the supply chain, but leave the majority of working women unprotected. The third reality was when we engaged with what others are doing, we found that many of the recommendations and intervention offered never tested in the region interventions. Most of the interventions were either Western imported or viewed the region with a lens that often labeled, I quote a label that we got, speaking for the silenced women of the Middle East. Some expert gave us culturally apologetic explanations that were outrageous, in my opinion, such as saying the low female participation in the Middle East is due to the mother-in-law factor that would not permit women to work. Maybe it's true. I'm not going to test that. Fourth, we realized that changing laws takes time. And did we really want to partner with governments to ask them to review their laws? Were they really our primary partners? Was that the right time and place to start? And were MENA governments in a position to discuss women's economic empowerment while they were fighting Daesh at the time? And finally, we realized that indigenous scholarship from and on MENA's economic contribution was not available. So 2017, 2018, I remember we were sitting in Ouarzazate, Morocco. Hello to everyone from there. And this is when we said, we need something from the region, by the region, for the region. And the puzzle became complete. And we put out a call, and we had the KIP Index as a successful partnership. And it became the first MENA sector-based measure of women-inclusive policies and practices in local organizations. It, as you know, or you will find out, it's the first quantitative and qualitative measurement of 11 countries surveying not just women, but also formal employers to capture employers' trends and the lived experiences of women. And we focused on 3 areas: recruitment, retention, and promotion across 6 sectors in the region: education, financial services, STEM, healthcare, professional services, and other services. That was in 2021. And here we are today, wave 1 and wave 2. The nuanced analysis allowed us to make concrete recommendations, no more mothers-in-law. And we worked with HR managers on those areas of recruitment, retention, and promotion of women in these 6 sectors. Support and accelerate women's inclusion, SAWI, took up a step further. While most foreign assistants, again, kept providing capacity building training. I still don't know what capacity building means, but maybe that's another discussion. They were training women. SAWI transformed the workplace, because training women and sending them back to a place that is traditional, that's not changing, does not help. This is where SAWI's uniqueness comes, that is very different. So this is the first indigenous initiative to focus on women's participation in formal economies in MENA. It partners with HR managers and thought leaders to reform and implement employment policies within organizations and across sectors. I am proud to say that in 2021, the United States launched its first ever international and first ever US strategy on global women's economic security. 2 of its lines of efforts align perfectly with what KIP and SAWI have been doing or had been doing for years. And I want to thank my colleagues who continued the work after I left: Ahmed, Shay, Gina, Maisa, and Rohan in DC, but also David and Maya in Beirut, and included the SAWI project with the Gender Equity and Equality Action Fund, which is out of USAID, to continue supporting this project. SAWI's approach is very simple. They mobilize academics, managers, government officials, civil society leaders, employers, and activists in inclusive policies and practices. Then they build communities of practice for HR managers and trailblazing employers. Finally, they deliberately generate applicable knowledge for the region and by regional actors to change workplace policies. Seeing this initiative from inception to fruition, I have learned a few lessons. The most important lesson, Charlotte, Carmen, Lena, and the team taught me, is the meaning of dignified work for women. We used to fight over this word. I used to think it was too much to ask for. But they taught me it's not too much to ask for dignified treatment of women in the workplace. It is not too much to ask to train staff and decision makers to provide women and everyone in the workplace a workplace free of gender-based violence and sexual harassment. They taught me it is not too much to ask that women and all individuals, regardless of identity, have meaningful and rewarding career and workplace experiences. In closing, allow me to close with the words of the late Damzeha Hadid, Iraqi architect, artist, and designer, who says, "Yes, I'm a feminist because I see all women as smart, gifted, and tough. And to that I add, and dignified." Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Rita, for the inspiring words, and again for everything that you have done to support us over the years. It was really, really wonderful to hear you today. Can you all hear me? I can't seem to see.
Yes, but you need to change the slides to see the presenter slides instead of the note slides.
I see. Okay, let me stop sharing and thank you. So that we've heard Rita again. Thank you so much, and we've heard Lina Dao's voice. It gives me great pleasure now to move to the main part of sharing the results. It gives me pleasure to introduce investigator of the SAWI project, Dr. Lina Dao. Dr. Lina Dao is an associate professor of organizational psychology at BI Norwegian Business School. She is also an adjunct professor at the American University of Beirut. Welcome, Lina.
Thank you, Charlotte. Thank you for having me. Super excited to be with everyone here today. Thank you, Rita, for your beautiful words at this really inspiring speech. It is a wonderful feeling to be part of this journey and to be working with everyone here, the participants and the SAWI team, all towards one goal, making this workplaces in the MENA region more inclusive and better places for women. So now we're going to start delving into the interesting part, into the data of the KIP Index. Before we start into that, in general, the idea of the KIP Index, as Charlotte said, if you can't measure it, you can't change it. Once we have this data, we can use this data to make the world a better place. That's our intention. We are not here to look at the data and to judge this company is better than the other or this country is better than the other. We want to use this data so that we could challenge each other to keep on moving the MENA region in a better direction towards workplaces that are more inclusive. Now, today we're going to be talking about the KIP Index. Tomorrow we're going to be sharing the Lived Experience Index. So the KIP Index, just a quick reminder also of what Charlotte shared with you earlier. The data that we will be sharing today is based on surveys that we collected in 2 batches. One batch was between 2017, 2018, and another one between 2019 and 2020. And this data collectively is from 3,274 employers from the countries that we are operating in. I'm going to tell you more about these and more about a reminder of the composition of SAWI. But in the meantime, and before we do that, I would like to take you to a poll. So we have a small question that we would like to ask you to see what you think. If you think about women recruitment trends in the MENA region, which sector of the following do you think performs best? And by perform best, we mean hires more national women and has more national women recruitment policies. For options, answer started: education, financial services, health services, or STEM. So let's see. We have 82 have responded. We'll give it a little bit more time for more people to get the chance to respond. Can everyone see the results as they are being filled, or I can just see them because I have the presenter view? I wonder.
I think you can just see them.
Oh, right. Okay. Oh, so Rabab, thank you for letting me know. So no, you cannot see them. Exciting, interesting results.
I can see them, Lina. I don't know why.
Your co-host.
Yeah, co-host. دكتور نادية عم تسأل أين السؤال؟ السؤال موجود، طلعت pop up screen. المفروض تكون طلعت.
So we ended the poll now.
We ended the poll. Okay. So بس عم ناخد فكرة. We want to have an idea about what people think. What do you think? Which of these sectors is performing the best? Thank you, Rosa, for sharing in the comments. So can everyone see the results now?
Yes.
Yes, great. So the results, in your opinion, you believe that the education sector is the best performing in terms of the recruitment of women. Second is health services, and then STEM sector, and then financial services. I have to say your predictions are quite close to reality, but we're going to delve into those details and break them down and show you all the results that we got. Very interesting. So let's talk a little bit about the KIP Index in and of itself. For those of you who, many of you know, you will get a fresh reminder. And for those of you who don't know, the KIP Index is divided into three sections. It measures the life cycle of employees in the workplace. It is a sector, it provides a sector-based perspective, which means that the data that are collected are based on those four sectors that we collected the data from: education, healthcare, STEM, and financial services. Now, as I said, the indices, both the lived experience and the KIP Index, they look at the three core dimensions across the life cycle, human resource life cycle, which are recruitment, retention, and promotion. And the countries that we have, the 9 countries that we have included here are Tunis, Lebanon, Al Maghrib, Al Jazair, Al Urdun, Bahrain, Libya, Al Iraq, and Kuwait. The data that we will provide today are the outcome data. We're not looking at this is not a technical session, so we will not be spending time on the technical aspects of the KIP Index and how it was developed. Instead, if anyone is interested about the technical side of things, you can check this QR code on the top of the screen here on the right-hand side. The QR code can take you to the full report that explains how the KIP Index was developed and how the questions were constructed. But now I can tell you a few things to keep in mind. First, the questions that are asked in the index are not opinions of HR managers. Here we are asking, the questions that we asked are about data from those organizations. For example, do you have policies XYZ? Do you follow through on those policies? What is the percentage of women versus the percentage of in managerial versus non-managerial positions? So all the data that is included in the index is data that is factual and not opinion-based data. Another important point to remember is that before finalizing the report, every single question that we had constructed and we asked the organizations was tested statistically, and we made sure that only the questions that were meaningfully contributing to the statistical model of the index were kept at the end. So the questions that we are sharing with you, the results that we are sharing, are based on data that has been validated and ensured that it is measuring those aspects that we are discussing with you. One more important aspect, and Charlotte, please remind me if I forgot anything else, is that the data that we collected from the 3,000 plus employers are mainly employers who are in the private sector or CSOs, NGOs, or the ones that are in between private and public. But we do not have public data or data from public organizations, or very limited, if any. So the majority of the data represented here is from the private sector. So if you noticed when we start showing you the results that you did not expect the results to be this way or that way, always remember what are the organizations that are included in the data. And one more thing about the organizations from the private sector, we did not include the multinational organizations. We included organizations that are headquartered in the countries that we are collecting data from, because we're interested in the national, mainly the organizations that are built in the region, for the region, and from the region. Did I forget anything, Charlotte?
Nope, that's perfect. Just to remind them about the SMEs. Most of them were small to medium-sized enterprises, capturing 90% of the economies in the region. But perfect, Lina, thank you.
Absolutely, because our economies tend to be represented by small and medium-sized organizations, and the percentage of large organizations in the MENA region is very small. Now, if we look at the specifics of the KIP Index, as we said, it is divided into questions that look at recruitment, retention, and promotion. And every one of those areas is divided into sub-areas. For example, the area of recruitment is divided into 2 dimensions, hired and policies. And by hired, for example, we mean the number of women who were hired over the past 4 years, in managerial and non-managerial positions. Of course, the hired sub-dimensions might have several questions that we combine together and we compute statistically to come up with a number. Policies refer to policies in recruitment, for example, the policies of hiring, promoting, maternity leave. So all the policies that make an employer attractive and that make women want to apply and be part of this organization. When it comes to retention, we looked at the representation, for example, how many women are actually in managerial and non-managerial positions and how many are in part-time versus full-time positions. We also looked at tenure. How long are women spending in those positions once they are, once they are recruited? And then we looked at policies that tend to keep women within the organization. So policies that create an environment of safety. These are typically policies of anti-discrimination and anti-harassment, and also how well are these policies enforced. Finally, when it comes to promotion, we had three sub-dimensions. One, we looked at the number of women and percentage of women in the board of directors, in the C-level position, chairing board of directors, CEOs, and other C-level positions. We also looked at development opportunities, women in training who are, how many women who are in non-management and in management who are being trained and prepared for promotion. And also, we looked at the number of women who were actually promoted in the past 4 years from one position to another. Okay, so I think now we can move to the video. We have the team created this beautiful video for you so you could see all of these sub-dimensions and dimensions in practice. How do they work and what do they mean? Enjoy the video.
It's time to delve into the details of the KIP Index and try to figure out how we can enhance our organization's inclusiveness and make structural change for more dignified employment of women.
Absolutely. Let's break it down by subdimensions outlined in the KIP survey.
Well, in recruitment, we first need to focus on the number of women recruited into management and non-management positions. So how are we doing on that front?
We've made progress, but we can do more. What about implementing inclusive recruitment policies that specifically target different women?
Like what?
Well, we can have a transparent salary scale.
I like the sound of that. We also need to focus on retention. We need to ensure a balanced representation in both management and non-management roles. Also, let's consider tenure. How long are women staying in these positions?
Good point. Women in our organizations tend to stay in the same position for too long, and many are even stuck in part-time positions, which is extremely unfair.
Absolutely. What else can we do to ensure women who are retained have a good workplace experience?
We can make the workplace a safer space for women. We need to have harassment and discrimination policies in place and enforce them.
Yes, absolutely. And for promotion, it's essential to have women in decision-making roles. Absolutely essential. How diverse is our current leadership?
There's always room for improvement. We should increase the number of women being promoted.
Well, let's not forget that we need to support women through career development and also through training opportunities.
It's clear we have work to do. With these subdimensions in mind, we can strategically enhance our HR structures, making way for change.
Agreed, 100%. Let's start developing action plans for each dimension. And this way, we can make our workplace more inclusive.
This KIP Index data was super helpful for understanding our recruitment, retention, and promotion efforts, especially for how we compare with other organizations in our sector. Now that we know where we stand, it'll help us make concrete action. I hope when we fill in the survey next year, we would have made progress on these dimensions.
It's time to delve.
So thank you for that. The KIP Index and the questions on the survey for employers, and when we bring them, as Lena was describing, to compute them. And now when we're looking at the actual numbers of our results, it's important that we take into consideration some guidelines of interpretation. So the utility of these indices depends on proper interpretation. There are three basic guidelines. The first guideline to keep in mind, very important, is that all the scores are relative. That means that This means that what the indices report on are the relative rankings within the region, relatively speaking. So 100% does not mean that this sector is absolutely the best and can't get any better. It actually means that it reaches the uppermost performance within the region relative to all the other organizations, all the other sectors that were measured. So it's a relative ranking. The second guideline is that the index scores give a broad picture, which is helpful, but keep in mind that any specific HR strategy that builds from the data must necessarily go deeper and unpack at the sub-dimension level. So when we're thinking about recruitment, we have to keep in mind for interpretation, the indices, those 2 or 3 points that Lena described in the previous slide and that the video went into. The third guideline for interpretation, it is the specific indicator measurement focus that give the crucial data for change. That is the specifics of whether we're looking at the level that a woman has reached on a particular indicator, the structure, so if the policy exists and whether it's being enforced, and the gap, the difference between men and women on the particular HR indicator that we are measuring. So these 3 guidelines are important as we now move into thinking about the results.
We have a question in the chat from Amal asking how many of the HR managers interviewed were men. I think Charlotte can answer that, but I just wanted to highlight that some of those people were HR managers, some of them were other types of managers who were responsible for or who were knowledgeable within the organization about the data and the sources of the data that relate to recruitment, retention, and promotion. And again, for me, Charlotte can give the exact numbers if you have them handy. But the point I wanted to make is that this is not an opinion survey. So the gender of the person who we interviewed didn't really matter as much because we were collecting data about numbers of women hired or numbers of policies or the existence or not of specific types of policies such as breastfeeding, anti-sexual harassment, anti-discrimination, and so on.
Yeah, so the specific numbers in each organization, it's usually a team and a database that is drawn from. So the gender was not recorded because it was an opinion, as Lena's saying. So great question, and thank you, Lena.
The lived experience index that we're going to discuss tomorrow, however, is mainly from women, and we will be hearing their opinion. Okay, so here we can see in this demographics page, we show you the number of the sizes of the organizations that we had included in the data set that we will be sharing with you now. So you will notice that the majority approximately across countries are between 5 and 24, but we also have organizations between 25 and 99. This is the second number. And we have some organizations that are bigger, but they are much smaller. So this is relatively a representation of types of organizations in the region. Also on the slide, you could see the different sectors and the number of organizations that we collected data from each of the sectors. Of course, when we compute, we do comparisons. The comparison is within sector. So we're giving you the data about every sector in each country. And when we do the comparison, of course, we do the comparison based on the data that we have, the comparative data that we have. Let's look at the regional trends and let's look at the KIP Index MENA average and what we have. So as Charlotte said earlier, the scores are from 0 to 100. The MENA average across all sectors was 45.31 out of a maximum score of 100. This suggests that much room for improvement in terms of recruitment, retention, and promotion policies and practices in the 2 waves of data collection is still expected. Across the 3 dimensions, we still have lots of room for improvement. So remember that this number can increase much more. But here where we wanted to share with you specifically promotion, retention, and recruitment, if we compare them to each other, the highest number was for recruitment and the lowest was for promotion, which is not very surprising because we are seeing trends more of recruiting women into organizations, but then once they come into the organization, they tend to stay in their jobs and not many of them end up being promoted. So there is, it kind of like reflects a little bit the general trends. Now, if you see at the bottom, these are the sub-dimensions that tend to lift the score up and which sub-dimension tends to push the score down. So for example, for promotion, we notice that development, which means women in training, whether at the managerial or non-managerial level, are helping the score go a little bit further up, whereas number of women in decision-making positions is pushing the scores down. Of course, we need to remember it's pushing the score up or down. The numbers are still not ideal and they all need to be pushed up. And together with all our efforts, we can do that. For retention, you can see also tenure is pushing up versus policies are down. So when policies is pushing the score down means that we don't have enough policies implemented in organizations that create a safer environment. Same thing for recruitment. We notice that policies also tend to be pushing scores down, making environments where there aren't enough attractive policies for attracting new talent or women into those organizations. Now we're going to show you how these scores change across countries and across in general and across sectors, but Charlotte can share with us more specifics about these regional trends.
So just a very brief overview of what are some of the key trends that are emerging in the region. So we see that across the region, women recruitment trends are getting better, that they're higher than retention and promotion. However, of course, because it's around 40, recruitment efforts are needed. Formal employment patterns suggest that part-time women trends are stronger than women that are employed full-time. So we see more part-time. The formal employment patterns in the index suggest that women are hired in actually both management and non-management positions. But if they're hired into management, it's in the middle or the lower level of management. So we're seeing here the glass ceiling. Women also spend a very, very long time in the same position without any promotion opportunities, again, indicating a little bit of a glass ceiling there. Women in management are given training and development opportunities. We see this across the region, and they're promoted within the lower level of management, but we're not seeing promotion up into the C-suite. There also appears to be a lack of formal harassment or discrimination policies that actually have been officialized. And even when they do exist, there's a lack of enforcement mechanisms. We'll now move to talk a little bit about the sector trends across the region. Alina, back to you.
Sure. So let's look at these numbers here. We noticed that the KIP Index MENA average is 45.31 out of a maximum of 100 again. Remember when we asked you for the poll, the majority of you positioned education at the very top, which actually it does rank better than the other sectors. However, the majority of you also thought that the financial sector services would be performing worse than STEM. In fact, our data showed that STEM sector is lagging behind the KIP MENA average, followed by financial services, healthcare, and education. So you were quite close in your predictions. So keeping in mind that the regional average is 43.1 on the KIP, we notice that only STEM is below the average. Now, this is, if you think about general scores, global scores, we notice that women in science, technology, engineering, and math tend to be underrepresented. So these trends are also similar to global trends where women seem to be underrepresented in the workplace. Now, if you look specifically what is driving the STEM scores in general down, we notice that it's basically the lack of or the low representation of women in decision-making positions. Whereas education, what we notice is driving the scores up is women in training, the availability, the access that women are having to training programs in non-managerial and managerial decision-making. And remember, the education sector here is not only school, we have universities is also part of the education sector.
Some general highlights of the overall indices scores by dimension. If you look at the very left column, we see that the 3 dimensions of recruitment, retention, promotion that are represented on KIP, with recruitment being the highest, and then retention, and then promotion. We also see in the second column that the yellow column, the yellow bubbles, that STEM consistently ranks lowest when we look at recruitment or retention or promotion. And we also see that education consistently, again, across the three ranks. Where do the other two sectors rank? Also, there's a emerging pattern. We have financial services and then healthcare being the second best in terms of the three dimensions. Taking a deep dive into STEM. So here we're only looking at data on STEM. Remember, STEM is the lowest relative performer of the sectors in the region. Note that the color gradient at the bottom corner of the slide, this grid is a visual representation of progress in terms of inclusive recruitment, retention, and promotion in the region. The darkest color represents relatively better or more inclusive RRP, and the lighter yellow represents relatively poorer performing. So when we look at STEM, we see that in terms of relative comparison, 4 countries fall towards the lower end, with Kuwait marking the lightest color of the bunch in terms of recruitment inclusive RRP. Morocco is the darker of the color, therefore representing a top performer. A closer look at the indicator level allows us to gain more nuanced understanding of what's happening here, what's driving the score up and what's driving the score down. So for Morocco, we see what's driving it up is in the realm of the dimension of recruitment. So we're seeing the employers that were surveyed are hiring more women and also having specific policies for women nationals related to the salary scale, hiring, mat leave, and so on. The Kuwait, on the other hand, what seems to be driving down the score in Kuwait has to do with retention and promotion. For retention, we see a relative lack of formal anti-discrimination, anti-harassment policies, and sometimes a lack of enforcement of those policies. We also see the need for more efforts around promoting women into decision-making roles. Remember here for the index, we're only talking about local women, citizens of the country, and we're talking about the employers that were surveyed. We're not going to take time because we're going to break out into breakout rooms in a moment and we'll go into more depth, but here's a general map for the financial services. We see again the countries with the range of colors, the MENA average being 46, and we have 6 countries that are darker, so above the MENA average, and 3 that are below the MENA average. Here we have healthcare. We're going to go quickly, so I'm just going to do this very quickly. Healthcare, we have, again, the MENA average being 51. We have 3 countries that are below that average or lighter in color and 6 above. We're going to, again, the breakout rooms, we'll talk about this a little bit more. Lena, over to you for the education, the last one.
Yes, I just wanted to highlight one thing here is that remember that we do have countries that are ranking, falling above and below the MENA average. But look at where the MENA average is on the key below. We still have 2 darker shades that no one is even close to. So we still have lots of room for advancement in all the countries. So this is, again, a relative comparison based on the scores that we have. Another point that I wanted to mention is that, as Charlotte was saying, what driving the score up and down. So sometimes, for example, we saw earlier, for example, that Kuwait what was driving the scores down was the lack of policies. But it might be that the practice of, let's say, recruitment, they are actually hiring a lot of women, but because there aren't many policies available, the scores will be driven down. So you need to be very nuanced when you're looking at the scores. You need to be very attentive to the score, the general score, and then the sub-dimension scores as well, in order to fully understand what is happening and to really think, what can we do in order to continue to push the scores further and further up year after year after year.
And I think what's important also to note, as Lena is saying, is that we divided it by sector, and the idea of sectors so that organizations working in that sector can work together to elevate the sector up. So we create a conversation within the sector. So the last sector, Lena?
Yeah. do we want to talk about the specific numbers again? So here we have 53. We're gonna divide these numbers. I think I would like to address some of the questions in the chat. We have a
I
question.
think we have to wait till we come back because we're running out of time for the breakout rooms.
If we are over time. So again, we will talk about this in more detail. Here we will notice that some scores will be driven up and down. We're going to break them down in the rooms. Unfortunately, you're not going to be able to see every single sector. You're going to have to choose one room to go to. So we will take you into one sector and delve further with you into the details of that. I'm going to pass over now to Dr. Carmen Jaha, our dear colleague and co-investigator on the SAWI project as well. Dr. Jaha is a senior researcher in migration and gender at Pompeu Fabra University, and also the founder and managing director of Soltara Consulting. Over to you, Carmen.
Thank you, Lina. Hi, everyone. It's good to be here. I don't know about you, but that was a lot of information. And my role really is to encourage those of you on the call who want to be part of the third iteration of data collection to reach out to our partner Sharakat, based out of Jordan. And what that means is that you will be helping close the data deficit that Rita and Charlotte highlighted so much. You will be helping close the data deficit in the region. You will be asked to fill a survey with a series of questions. As Lina said, these are factual questions. They pertain to the existence or non-existence of policies around recruitment, retention, and promotion of women. By sharing this data, you'll also become part of our large community of employers in the region, taking action to fill the data deficit, but also provide dignified access to employment and upward career trajectories for women. So if you're on the call and you're interested to join the 3,000 plus employers, please reach out to Sharakat. The information is available on the slide, and it's also part of the material that you're able to scan via the QR code. The confidentiality and anonymity also of people filling the survey will also be ensured. This concludes in this moment the live streaming part of our event. Today we've shared data from employer policies, and tomorrow will be all about women's experiences. I would like to ask those of you that are on the call, please, to turn on your cameras so we can take a large photo to commemorate this gathering. And then for those of you that are staying with us on the Zoom, you may choose from the poll which sector you'd like to go break out into rooms. You will be assigned immediately, and we can delve into Q&A, reflections, and what does this data mean and what we can do together. So, and I want to repeat a very heartfelt thank you to Charlotte Karam and to all of the co-PIs on the call, to Rita Stefan for a super inspiring keynote speech, our MEPI DC support office and everybody that helped make this happen, Ahmed Gutan, and also the MEPI Lebanon team. Thank you, Maya and David, as well as everybody in the administration, both at AUB and University of Ottawa, that have been helping step by step in the implementation of this project. Now it's time for a photo followed by a poll. So with your approval and consent, if you may turn on your cameras, we will be taking a large screenshot of our gathering today.
Okay, I think we're good.
Thank you. So if you're on YouTube, thank you so much for joining us. Join again tomorrow. And for those of you on Zoom, please let's proceed. Select the sector that you would like to be placed in.